So Ben, welcome to Warrior Within. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. It really is.
And probably for guys that don't know you, and I'm sure there'll be a few of them in Australia, but let's start from the beginning and maybe just who is Ben Bidwell and how did you come to be the naked professor?
Something's obviously up, because when I hear that naked professor now, I feel like I just want to be Ben. I don't want to be the naked professor, but I'll tell the story and how I've got to this point. This may resonate with a few, but I was a typical guy. It was girls, money, and parties, and that was my life for 30 years. And I was doing all right at it, and I was ticking a lot of boxes. And I always think back to time in my 20s when I had my first flatmate, and he said, "Ben, you're living the dream. This is all the stuff." And I just remember thinking, "Oh, if this is living the dream, I'd hate to not live the dream, because it doesn't feel that dreamy to me." And I always put it down to just ambition. I was just an ambitious guy. I needed more girls, I needed more money, and I needed more parties. So those are my things. And I'm just ambitious, and those people are happy with less, then they're just not ambitious like me. So that was kind of how I lived. But and to be honest with you, I probably would have cracked on that way. Although it felt empty, society never showed me a different route at that point. The only thing that changed for me, or not changed, but was I had this issue around sex, and I'd always struggled to orgasm from the first time I ever experienced it with a partner at 18. That was how it worked. I was like, a bit weird, and then it just kept happening, and all through my 20s, it was kind of a bit of a laugh. I remember when I was at uni, the lads would kind of talk to me and sort of say, it's a gift. I've got the opposite problem, and it was quite fun and playful, and although obviously frustrating at the same time. But then when I got to the age of 30, it had interrupted a few relationships, and I was starting to think, well, I want to have kids one day. So I opened my eyes and opened my heart to the possibility of change around that. And at the time, I lived with a professional rugby player, and he was having an injury problem that had kept him off the field for a long time, and the doctors were saying he should be fit. And the last thing he tried was, well, I'll see if I can mentally try and do something around this. And he worked with a hypnotherapist, and with an open heart at that point, or an open mind at least, I sort of listened to what he was doing with her and started sort of asking a few questions, and then got to the point where I sort of started to think to myself, well, have I got an injury? If she's helping him, could she help me? And if my mind wasn't open, I wouldn't have had the inquisition to ask. I would have just, I would have taken the piss. That's what kind of initially, that's where my questioning was a little bit. It was a bit like, you think you're going to sort him out by changing his mindset, And so I started working with her, and I thought she was going to teach me to become some kind of sex guru. And I couldn't wait for all the new tricks I was going to learn. And the reality is we never talked about sex. We just talked about mindset and opening up my mind and changing how I thought, and introducing me to the concept of vulnerability and connecting with my emotions and all this very unmanly stuff that I'd blocked out for a long time. And I changed pretty quickly. And I remember quite early on in the journey, I remember sending my mum some flowers and telling her I loved her, something I'd never done. Never told her I loved her in my previous years. I wasn't, although I did, she's an amazing woman. I wasn't there to share that. And I remember that really sort of prickling my ego, that moment. Is this me? I don't think this is me, but something's saying I've got to do this. And I remember when I did it, and she called me up, and although it felt uncomfortable, something within me, it was a different feeling of kind of, I've made an impact there. Or I'm glad I did that. And there were these little signs as I was going along that something was changing, and I was feeling different feelings, I guess, or starting to feel, and it was positive. There was something good going on, although it was a challenge. And that was really the start of my journey. I just went from there. That was 8 years ago. I'm 38 now. And pretty quickly I realized that if I could change, then anyone can change, because I was as shut off as anyone. I was as blocked as anyone. So I trained to become a coach. And 3 years ago now, only 3 years ago, I started writing about all this stuff because it was my passion. And at the time, although I studied to be a coach, I wasn't practicing it a lot. It was kind of a hobby, or it was something I was sort of dabbling in, but it wasn't my full-time profession. I was working in a tech company or running a tech company. And there were a few problems in the company, and I was reliant on the tech guys, and I just thought, I need something that I own, that's mine, under my control. So I started writing, and I started thinking I wanted to create something and share this message. And I just knew from working in tech that the internet is a noisy place, and I needed a story, and I needed a point of interest, and I needed something to set me apart. And kind of just looked at everything. I don't know where it came from, but I just thought my message is a very open, vulnerable one. You know, I'm shedding my masks. I'm bearing my soul. I'm showing up fully. There's no hiding place here with what I'm trying to say. And I just thought of this opportunity to create some imagery that could reflect that. And that was me in iconic places in London, always back to camera, but without any clothes on, in kind of a very creative, hopefully kind of artistic way, not kind of seedy. And I put the two together and married my images with my messages, and it just felt right to call myself the Naked Professor. You know, I was sharing about the stuff the Naked Coach didn't seem right, and so the Naked Professor was born. And 3 years on, I've just sort of continued to write and share about this and open my heart and try and share my truth, and without fear or judgment or embarrassment or shame, or there's no failure on this. I'm just showing up, and it's going to go where it goes. And it's a beautiful journey, and it takes me to have conversations like this with you and to connect with like-minded people. And I just feel very privileged and fortunate for the whole journey. And that's kind of my big rant to begin with, I guess.
Well, man, it's a beautiful story, and it's a strong share. So, thank you for opening your heart and being so vulnerable, because, straight away, we're talking about sexuality and some of the big topics which often get, brushed under the carpet with, particularly with us blokes. Not many blokes are going to go down the pub and talk about, how they can't have an orgasm. So, I mean, can you connect that issue to a story growing up, or some sort of, is there a direct correlation between that kind of physical outcome and in terms of what was going on with your story?
I don't think it was a specific event. I don't think that, there was no trauma or specific trauma. But I think when I look at the way I grew up and the experiences I had, I was the youngest of 3 boys, and sitting around the dinner table, I felt like my voice wasn't really of value. My brothers were 6 and 8 years older. Whatever I was up to, they'd already achieved it. They were doing more important, bigger things. And I just didn't feel of much value. And at the same time, when I was growing up, I was looking around to society, and I was seeing, Arnie as Terminator, and Sylvester Stallone as Rocky, and, Rambo, and kind of these were the pillars of masculinity. These were the ultimate men. And combined with that, my mum was a nurse, and she's a very kind and sensitive and loving woman. And I definitely had that in me. And I loved that in her. But what I saw and what I felt was that there was no place for this. That was not my path as a man. And with that feeling of sort of lack of self-worth and low value, I began to put on a mask, and I blocked out all feelings, and I tried to be a man that I thought society wanted me to be. And I blocked out my truth, and I stopped feeling. And that was who I was as a teenager. And I really lacked any kind of validation myself. So I really went seeking it hard from everyone else. And I have no shame saying that. It feels like it's quite a negative thing to share, but it was all part of my journey. And I was doing what I was doing, and then it didn't feel wrong at the time. It felt completely normal. And I had no awareness around it. But looking back, and it wasn't until in my 30s that I added up any of this stuff. I had no idea. And I didn't feel low value, or I didn't realize I felt low value at the time. I didn't realize I was blocking out my emotions. I didn't, I just thought I was being who I was. But the reality is I was acting out of my conditioning. I was acting out of the experiences that I'd had as a child that led me to put masks on, led me to try and protect myself from the pain of feeling low value, and the pain of feeling rejected because I had emotions or sensitivity inside of me. And I was becoming someone that I wasn't. And now, back into my 30s, I'm returning back to my truth, who I really am. And that's not for everyone, but it's for me. And that's what counts.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I think a lot of guys are going to resonate with this idea of that kind of conditioning in terms of how the boy becomes a man, with, you know, getting told to sort of harden up. And you know, I was reading recently, someone said the three most destructive words you can say to a boy is be a man, because the idea of manhood is the one that you've just beautifully outlaid. And but what I find interesting though is that the physical outcome of that story in your head was I guess, you know, the sexual, I'm going to call it dysfunction, but whatever you want to call it. Whereas with other people, it's behavioural, it's all sorts of things. But it's interesting that it translated to that. And I'm thinking to myself, if the message to you as a young boy was don't be vulnerable, put on all these masks and stuff, like that moment of orgasm with another person is such a surrender. It's like the ultimate moment of being the most vulnerable you can possibly be. So it's interesting that that's the thing that you switched off.
Totally, and you're exactly right. I guess I didn't really finish that story because, yeah, you know, when you add all that stuff up, you know, you stop feeling when feelings are natural. An orgasm is a feeling of ecstasy, really, isn't it? It's the ultimate feeling, and you can't choose what you feel. You know, you can't go and blocking out any shit feelings or any negativity, and I'm just going to feel the lovely, great things. That's not how emotions work. You're connected to them, and you feel the full spectrum. Or you don't feel, or, you know, or you might feel a little bit of all of them, you know, whatever. But I felt none, and so it kind of naturally shows up.
Yeah.
But that's my experience, and yeah, you're totally right. It can manifest in all sorts of ways, and for lots of people, it can be very different experience. I mean, I'm probably in the minority of how it showed up for me, but I do believe our body talks to us, and for me, that's how my body responded, and I'm grateful, because if it didn't, I would have continued on this unfulfilling path that I thought was the route to success.
Yeah, and I'm glad you talked about gratitude there, because your body has given you like a very clear message. With other guys, it's really subtle, and you've got to almost sit still to hear it. But that one's like, you know, that's pretty cut and dried. It's like, this is what's going on, brother. You know, it's not a quiet knock.
No, it's not. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, well done for I mean, you know, not only heeding the call, but then sort of turning it into your life's purpose in a way. That's pretty awesome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, you know, I would have had no idea that this was my purpose at all. It would have been very foreign, and I still, you know, think back to how I would have communicated with myself in my 20s, and you know, two very different people. Still some similarities for sure, but I would have had no idea that this was the route I would have gone on. But I think I work as a purpose coach to try and help people with their purpose, and I think, you know, our purpose exists in stripping ourselves back of all the stories we told ourselves, and actually really going back into who we are. And when we start really being who we are and following our path to things that really interest us, or really who we want to be, and really showing up as ourselves, like, you know, that raw, naked self, if you like, then your purpose will uncover itself from there. But all the time we've got our masks on and we're pretending to be something that perhaps doesn't really deeply, authentically fit us. You're struggling to reach your purpose, because I guess we're getting into the law of attraction, but you're never following the little signs, the little signals, the little authentic creative opportunities that are there. If you're not tuned in, you're not letting that come shine through. So yeah, in stripping myself of all the stories, all the conditioning from my past, my purpose began to shine through, and yeah, I'm totally on purpose now. I feel very, very fortunate that this is every day I get to do things like this and show up in my authentic space. It's very fortunate, and it must be similar for you in that respect.
Yeah, look, it is. Like, I often say that, you know, your ultimate purpose is really just becoming yourself. Like, that's the goal, and you just got to figure that out. And I guess in a sense, because yourself is always changing and evolving, so your purpose kind of follows that.
Absolutely,
so, which
absolutely.
is why it's a lifelong journey, you know. So I think that's
Absolutely.
that idea. But I think a lot of guys that I that I work with and talk to oftentimes struggle with finding their purpose. So I think it's interesting in that you're actually a purpose coach. But I think what guys want is they want to know, like, exactly what their purpose is. And my sort of feedback to that is, purpose is almost like a river, you know. I'm sure this will resonate with you, and you just got to get in the river, and as you keep flowing down the river, I guess, you know, it'll narrow. and your purpose and your focus will become almost laser-like. And by that time, you've got this whole body of water, which is, imagine the power of it if you keep on thinning it down. And then when you're on your purpose, you're almost unstoppable. So
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good analogy.
Is that yeah, it resonates with you too, yeah.
Absolutely. Or what I'd say is that within that river, there'll be some pretty big boulders that you smash into along the way that people will be going, don't get in that river, and don't, there's big boulders in there. Avoid that. It's much safer just to walk along the path.
Yeah.
That's clear. So do that. But because you're really exposing yourself to judgment if you're really going to authentically step into your truth, because we are all unique, and we're taught, the way I see it is that our ego tries to get us to conform. Our ego wants that security of being part of a tribe, do what everyone else is doing. But that's a very different message to what I call our heart or our soul. That inner energy of unique personality inside of us, or that unique energy, more like. And when we do that stuff that's truly ourselves, then people are going to look at you and it's suddenly you're doing some different stuff and it's unfamiliar to them. And when I started my blog, it's a prime example. Huge amount of possible judgment, and I think there still is. And some of my friends said I was having a breakdown when I started it and started writing all this stuff, and that's okay. And as I say, it's not a breakdown; it's a breakthrough. This is self-expression. This is truth coming through. It's no longer hiding. And this is exactly where your purpose comes alive. But it's not easy, because we do live in a society that says, "Hey, be the same." Get the good job, get the money, get the house, get the wife, and bingo, you're off. And,
you can really see that playing out right now in the situation that we're in at the moment. It's amazing how quickly people will just sort of do what they're told, and the social distancing them. I'm not that you shouldn't be doing that, but it's just interesting for me to note how everyone just says, "Oh, all right, that's what everyone's doing, so we'll do it." It's like there's very few questions asked, and I'm always one for questioning everything. I understand.
That's probably a conversation for another time. I'd love to know some of the questions that you're asking, because
well, a lot. Yeah, it's like over my, which is remarkably similar to yours, I guess, too, in terms of living that corporate life. Maybe for a little bit longer. It took me till I was, probably nearly 10 years later, before I had my sort of wake up call and changed my life around. But I feel like it's a journey for most guys. You sort of reach a certain point where something happens, like your wife leaves you, or there's a chronic illness or some other issue, and you have to actually turn inward and look at yourself, and all of a sudden things actually have to fall apart before they come back together again.
Yeah, I always go back to Tony Robbins. Change only happens when the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
because it's true, isn't it? The change is hard. You are, as I say, you're going to be judged, and our ego, that voice in our head, is going to say, "Don't do it. Stay. Keep doing what you're doing. That's kept you alive so far. Keep being that person. That's okay. I know it might be a bit empty, but whatever, you're alive. That's all I'm after." And so it's hard to step into that space, and it often, for a lot of people, like you say, to me, they're only prepared to go through that when actually it hurts so much where they are. It's kind of like, screw it, this is not a fun place, so let's try change, because it can't get much worse. And that's a shame, but I'm sure everyone's got a story when in this space, because it's rare that people go, "Oh, life's so perfect, I'm going to look for some change."
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, the sad thing is that with a lot of men, though, that they reach that point where you say quite beautifully, the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change. But for a lot of guys, we look at suicide rates in our country, that actually prefer to end their life than change. It seems like that's the fix for a lot of guys. So to me, that just shows just how much resistance there is to want to change. It's like perhaps there's a solution you turn to first, which is something that we need to work with guys to actually kind of, our big mission with Warrior Within is to actually do something about that suicide rate, because it's 6 men a day in Australia. I don't know what it is in the UK, but it's critical right now that we address that. And particularly, with what's happened with coronavirus and stuff, I mean, I'm not sure in the UK, but in Australia, we're just seeing mental health issues, particularly amongst men, just skyrocketing. They're having those masculine elements, which we talked about earlier, like your job and your security and your ability to provide for your family, all being taken away from them. Alcohol sales are going up through the roof and all these other things. And it kind of feels like a perfect storm right now for just an explosion in mental health issues, particularly in men.
I totally hear you, and it's almost like our identity is stripped, isn't it? When you can't do all the things that you were, that was your identity. It was the places you went and the trips you go on and the money you earn and the cars you drive and the house you've got and all this stuff that suddenly doesn't matter. No one's seeing any of it. It's not relevant. You can't go anywhere. All the external opportunities are done. Everything is within, really. And you can make your life look as shiny as you want, but if you don't love yourself internally, it's hard. And on the suicide rates, I hear you, and I think it's unfortunately testimony to the society that we live in, that for men it's we would rather take our lives than own the fact that there are challenges and try and I mean it's a tough thing to say, but if we can change that perception that it's okay to have challenges, to not be perfect, that we are making mistakes, that we're not perhaps in the best place, then rather than ending our lives, perhaps we can have this more open society of actually being able to talk about it and realize that we're not on our own with that. And clearly with suicides as they are, men don't feel that. They feel like the better option is to run.
Yeah.
I do think that's caught up in the society's perception of telling us that it's weak as men to have any kind of problem. And we subconsciously grow up thinking that, we should be the strong ones. And we can't bear to show any weakness. And it's, it couldn't be more damaging.
No, I agree. And that's what I love about, your stuff, your blog posts and stuff you're doing on social media, because it's like super, super vulnerable. Like I've just been following your story about how you're feeling around the isolation. And, some men could look at that and say, oh, that's just being weak. But to me, it speaks, it comes from the heart, and it's what a lot of men are feeling. You've just got the courage to say it. And so I guess my one question is, how you doing, bro? Doing all right with it all? You were talking about the things that are getting you down, and you doing all right?
Yeah, do you know what? I really am. I share that, and it's true. I feel very uncreative at the moment, very uninspired, particularly around socials. It's hard to, nothing's going on really. I'm trying to write a book, so that's kind of my life. There's not much to share, and I feel pretty uncreative. I literally, I'm going living room to bedroom, and I'm okay with that. I am okay with that, and I'm fortunate. I really am very fortunate, particularly compared to many. But yeah, I feel pretty kind of not uninspired, but uncreative and just a bit flat. Now, one of the challenges is really interesting. You raised what you did, and I really appreciate the way you shared that, because often, when I'm sharing this stuff, people come and they try and fix me, and they go, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry you're feeling this way, and it's awful. I hope you feel better soon." And it's like, I don't need any fixing, and I'm not after solutions. It's pretty natural actually right now that there's going to be times when I feel a bit stuck and I'm creative. This is into my 6th week. So this is almost completed my 6th week of barely leaving the flat. And I combine that, I've had very bad hay fever. So this summer's just coming in England. So I had the window shut and the door shut and barely even, ventured outside. So none of that is defining me. This is not who I am. It's just what I'm feeling in this moment. And in recognizing that and being okay to share that, it's like, well, and what, that just sharing that is creating space and being real, allowing connection, allowing people to see me. And tomorrow I may feel super creative. Something might change. In fact, in writing the words that I did, I already felt more creative. I already felt more inspired. So we have such a perception of emotions that they're all consuming. And it's, if you're not feeling so great, how can you not feel great? I feel so sorry for you. Please, we need to get you back better as soon as possible. Everyone has bad days. It's natural. It's the human existence. It's okay. It's real. And I'm not drowning in these emotions. They're present, and I'm happy to connect with them and be real. But it's okay. You know, do you know what I mean?
A 100%. Yeah, it's like, I think, yeah, everybody wants you to be up all the time, but I think in this society, the going up, the, you know, what I call the ascent, is kind of what society's modeled on. Like, success is up there, you know, everything is up there, and the whole thing is geared towards going up, 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 and like peak experiences. And if anybody descends, that's bad, and we have to stop the fall, and whatever I can do, you know, it's like, but actually in the descent, there's so much gold. You know, it's like, that's when you really learn about yourself, you know, in the pain, in the underground, I like to call it. So sometimes, actually, you know, spending 6 weeks stuck in your flat, you know, with the hay fever and you might actually uncover a piece of yourself that you would never have seen, like some truth, if you'd just been out in the world, you know, being Ben and being all up all the time. So I actually think, sometimes when I'm in those places, I think to myself, okay, good. This is good. Something's going to happen. And you know, there's our indigenous culture here. There's so much wisdom in there. But you know, the elders, they talk about this idea of kind of time spent under the earth, and 4 days deep, 5 days deep. They talk about, you know, and it's like, and I remember an elder once saying, you know, don't tell anyone, but we kind of like it down there.
Yeah.
And I kind of understood what he meant. There's sort of this familiarity. And this idea that, you know, that's how diamonds are made, under pressure, under the ground.
Yeah, it's almost, it's not actually the emotion itself that's the problem. It's our perception of the emotion. It's like, oh, I'm feeling sad. Oh, this is so awful. I shouldn't feel sad. Society's going to judge me for feeling sad. I must be, you know. And then we put the mask on. Then we lose our authenticity. You know, we're constantly trying to paper crack over everything by doing everything to stop us being sad. And it's actually not. Well, I'm feeling sad. What, you know? Let's check in. Perhaps what's that about? Where's it come from? Being okay with it. Is it showing up for a reason? Is it showing us a different path? Like, all of this has got a bit of a bad rep. People go, you know, you're overthinking stuff. You know, God, just chill out, dude. You know, and it's like, this is, I'm pretty chill, but this is important work. You know, I'm not overthinking it. I'm just feeling into what's going on in my body.
Yeah,
it's healthy.
It's very healthy. You know, in the Warrior Within, we do a lot of work with mythology, and people like Robert Bly. You know, he talks about ashes work. This idea that you actually have to kind of clean the fireplace out before you get to go to the ball. And I think this is what we're talking about here, this territory. And I believe, you know, our subconscious, like, I don't know how it works in the UK, but if someone says, how are you going? You know, like, most men just say, oh, I'm great. And they don't even think about how they're actually feeling. And I guarantee that probably more than 50% of the time, if they actually stopped and said what's true for me in my heart right now, they'd probably be like, I'm actually feeling shit. but we would say, I'm good. Right?
Of course. Because if, imagine, for the majority of men, if you say, how are you? And they go, I'm feeling shit. You know, the person on the end of it is like, whoa, you know, it's like, don't tell me that. You know, I didn't actually want to know that stuff. Like, just tell me everything's fine and we can talk about the football or whatever it is.
Yeah,
you know,
why, you know, we need to start brokering these conversations that go a bit beneath the surface. You know, because it's like, yeah, you're right, because it takes the listener to engage in that as well. So, you know, the man, if he's going to say, you know, things aren't right and I'm concerned my wife's going to leave me or something like that, he needs to know that the person he's talking to is going to be able to hold space for that.
And I think that is a big part. You know, we're not familiar with, so unfamiliar with you know, negative emotion and dealing with them, that we become scared to share because we don't want to inflict it on the person. We're not sure how they'll be able to deal with it, and so we just think, oh, it's easy just to go, I'm fine. You know, and you don't want to be Debbie Downer, you know. And if we can just shift all of that, fundamentally for me, it starts with actually, it's, you know, this message, it's okay to not be okay. So that when we do say we're not okay, we're not saying the world's about to end. We're just saying, today's not such a good day and I'm being real with you. And I'm sure you don't have perfect days every day either. And that's okay. But I'm not about to break down in tears on you. I'm not about to do, I'm just this is how I feel. I always, in my public speaking, I always start each talk with I have "How are you?" 3 times on my slides, 3 ways. And I say there's 3 ways this question can be answered. And the first is, "How are you?" "Yeah, I'm fine, thanks." And it's just this entry into a conversation. The second way, "How are you?" Really sharing the truth. I'm scared. I'm on this stage and everyone's looking at me and I'm pretty nervous. I don't know how this is going to go. And then the third way, for me, was how are you? And, for 30 years, I didn't know how I felt. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know really what emotions were, but I numbed them out. So it really was a case of just being, yeah, I'm fine. There wasn't anything else really. So, yeah, and I wish we could just live in a space, and this is why I feel very fortunate, because I do live in this space a lot where I can ask someone, "How are you?" and they can tell me, and they can ask me back, and I can tell them, and we can be familiar with each other and sit in this space of actually knowing we're under the surface. We're getting to know each other, and that for me, now we're getting into what connection is about. And
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess also there's a question of the pace of society, and when someone says "How are you?" they only want a 1-word answer because they simply haven't got time. It's to be there if the person's falling apart or whatever. So you actually need them to just say "good," so you can say "I've done my job," and we can all move on. But so for me, I've found this interesting way of bypassing all that by just throwing out a number on a scale of 10. So. Because it actually is a nice entry into a conversation if you want to, but you can also have a laugh and move on or whatever. It's like, "So how you doing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, 6.5.
Perfect. Nice. I like that.
Yeah, it's kind of, because it's very, very truthful, but it doesn't require the other person to have to do anything.
Yeah. And I get it. If you getting on a bus and the bus driver says, "How you doing?" he's not ready to hear your life story.
Yeah.
And same perhaps if you're walking in the office and "How you doing?" Yeah, you wouldn't get much done in your day if so of course there is, but I like what you're saying there. If we just chuck a quick number, we can make that scalable across the world and everyone knew, then we could just say that number, and then if we've got time and we're ready and it's important that we listen, then if they say a 2 or a 3 and we can go, tell me about it, I'd love to. What's going on?
Well, if somebody comes back at me and says, 4, I'm like, if I'm talking to a man, it's like, "Brother, is there anything I can do to at least get that to a 5?
Yeah, I hear you. Oh, that's nice. I like that. Yeah. I really like it.
So
very good.
Yeah, it's kind of so, because I really hear what you're saying. I think this is why I wanted to connect with you, because I knew that kind of this is where you were headed. I actually. I like the fact that you're so open, so vulnerable in all your stuff. It's like, and what you were saying about people wanting to fix you all the time because of your writing, the thing that came straight away to my head was, I write a bit of poetry, but a lot of my poetry is very, very dark because I use it as a tool when I'm feeling down. And so therefore, if you read a collection of my poetry, you'd think, "Oh man, like Ash is the most depressed, virtually suicidal human being I've ever met." And it's like, no, it's a tool. I write from that place. Like if I'm not writing, it's generally poetry. It's generally because, I don't need to. Everything's fine. If I could write from a place of beauty and joy as well, but I tend to write when I'm in a dark place. That's just the way I am.
I tend to, I totally hear you. And I find, talk about the fickle world of social media, but I find people tend to engage with my messages when they are, people don't, in my audience anyway, people don't tend to want to know that everything's great and I'm doing fine and today's a really wonderful day. People are much more engaged, and not to say that this is the reason for me to share it, but I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but often actually when I just share my truth, I say, this is, I'm not feeling quite so creative. I'm feeling pretty stuck right now. And, whether it's because of the world we live in terms of social media, everyone presenting this very positive story all the time, that it's refreshing for them to read some honesty and because they feel it too. And actually, finally, they feel connected rather than these people seem to be having a wonderful life in the downtime with all this stuff they're doing. Whereas actually now, oh, thank God someone's feeling the same. I don't feel so alone now. I don't know, but you're right. I struggle to be quite so expressive or sort of I don't know if it's possible to be vulnerably open and let your heart be seen to quite the same degree if, you're saying everything's great. Do you know what I mean? I think perhaps society's tarnished it because we always present that and we don't necessarily associate it with the truth.
Yeah, and there's something in it about what you were saying around social media as well. There's a lot of inauthentic stuff going on when people are presenting the impression that they want to make in other people about themselves, which is they're having this wonderful, joyful life, and maybe so they can convince themselves that it's true. I'm not sure, but yeah, for me, the authenticity is going to come around what you're really feeling, and sometimes that can be blissful and joyful. I'm just saying, for me, it's generally not the time when I feel like putting pen to paper. Maybe because I'm out there smelling the roses and doing the stuff, and and enjoying my life. So maybe if I'm silent on social for a few days, that's why.
You're having a great time, and
Yeah,
that's beautiful, isn't it? No,
doing it.
you have got me thinking though. I'm going to try and lean into more of the emotion when I am in a good space, and try and still vulnerably share that, if you like, with and I guess perhaps the vulnerability comes from that. It comes from a place because, particularly in this country, in England, we like to batter people down. We don't like to celebrate the successes. As soon as people's having success, the media are all over them to try and show them negatively.
Yeah.
And we kind of that kind of is throughout our culture. And so the vulnerability is almost being able to, for me, would be almost to be able to comfortable and celebrating the fact that I'm doing pretty well here, and I'm pretty proud of everything I've got going on. And that's particularly in England, I think that's a vulnerable act almost.
Well,
So but I will try. I'm going to try.
yeah, it's funny what you say, particularly in England. But yeah, I can imagine an English person responding to that by saying, fucking Ben, he's always so fucking happy all the time. But,
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, but it is an interesting thing. I mean, for me, I do love my poetry, and what immediately came to mind was who do I know who speaks beautifully about the bliss and the joy, and it's poetry like Rumi's, isn't it? That beautiful sort of ecstatic heart love poetry stuff, and he just says it so beautifully. But he can also talk from a dark place as well. So
have you always had poetry within you, or is it something that as you've gone on your journey, to use for better words, have you has it come to you during that process?
Well, my corporate life was I was a communications guy, so I'm very I love the written word, and so the expression of poetry is kind of the ultimate of
Yes.
words on paper, and just every word being so precise, and it really is a passion of mine to read it, and to write it when I feel called, so yeah, it's definitely
Beautiful.
bordering on an obsession.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Mm.
I only asked because, I mean, I would never have seen myself as ever having any poetry inside of me, or even something I was bothered by. And as I've gone on this journey, I've found that it's something that's just kind of poured out of me. I've wanted to express how I feel into this sort of poetic kind of sense. It made it was more creative for me. It was a nice way to express it. It got more off my chest. So it's something that definitely has evolved for me as I've gone on this. And it's been a really nice kind of one of the nice things that's come out of me from this.
It's beautiful to hear that, because I think, a lot of the time we're just teaching guys to kind of get out of their head and get into their heart. And I feel like poetry is a really great way to do that. And it also helps guys to take the mask off, because a lot of guys' initial reaction to poetry is like, well, I'm not reading poetry. That's just, it's just not manly. But once they do, and they start to see some stuff in there, which maybe even helps them with their own lives, it's a beautiful thing. So for me, it's a lovely tool.
I liken it actually a little bit. So I was always one of those people in cards, dear mum, happy birthday, love Ben. And that was it, and if someone said, no, write a message, I'd be like, I'd sit there with a pen, but I don't know what to write. What am I meant to write? And just nothing will come out. Whereas now, you literally get the card, dear mum, and the words just flow. I don't know what I'm going to say or where it just comes from my heart. And I wrap it up and send it off. And it's that message that I want to give to her. And that's another sign for me of where my communication comes from. Because if I'm communicating from my head, I'm trying to work out what I should say and how I should say it and everything. And it's a bit of a struggle and I can't do it. Whereas you tune into that heart, it flows. It just, it's alive and you can feel it. It just flows out and it just comes. And, whether it's in a card or in poetry or, in blogging or whatever it is, but it's been a big sign for me of the journey I've been on. And yeah, I love expressing myself now. I love sharing all of that stuff. I love writing a card to my mum and, that being the most important thing that I give her, letting her know what's inside of my heart.
Well, I can tell you, after they've gone, those are the things that are left. And a very poignant moment in my life came to my mind when you were speaking just then, and that is when my younger sister died back in 2007. Speaking at her funeral, the words that came out of my mouth, I realized afterwards, I just wanted the people who were gathered there to see how eloquent that I was, which is a very head thing. It was nothing to do with of course, there was grief and love for my sister, but predominantly it was about wanting to make a good impression in the people that were there, where they walked away and said, "Oh man, Asher can really speak well." That was my goal. And that's a big revelation. And that's, I've got to own that. And that's a big thing to own. And what I realized was 3 years later, when I was speaking at my mother's funeral, it was totally different. Like, I really didn't give a shit what anybody in the gathering thought. The tears were flowing and I was just speaking about my mum from my heart. And I realized how much I'd changed in those 3 years. From
Beautiful.
Yeah. And so absolutely. Like I'm following every word you're saying.
And within you what felt more right. What aligned most with you when you shared from those two different places.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. I can read back. I can read both those pieces of writing right now, and you can feel the difference. Like one's very polished and professional, and probably sounds good, but it wasn't heartfelt.
And I think that's a really important part, actually, of all of this, is that when you do, as a man or a woman, when you do learn to share from your heart, people do begin to feel you. When you do communicate from your head, and you say kind of the right stuff or the things that just make sense or you should say, people don't feel you. It's a very different way of communicating, like you just say, and that's I've learned that connection is the most powerful drug out there for me, and it only comes from when I share from my heart. And so a big driver in everything that I do is that I crave connection. I love connection, perhaps because I went without it for so long and I blocked it out. But now I'm so ready to open my heart and share from that place, because I know it brings me connection, and I love that. That's my goal, if you like. But I just know when I go, if I go into my head, or when I go into my head, people won't feel me the same. So I totally, hear what you're saying, but not to, you don't need fixing, of course, at all. But of course, in 2007, you did what you knew best, and you didn't know any other, and we can't blame ourselves, can we? It's part of the journey.
That was where I was, and that's fine. It couldn't have been any different.
No.
In fact, if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have learned some really valuable lessons. So it had to happen. As all things do. But I'm interested in, obviously when you public speak a lot, if you're a guy that comes from the heart, it also means that you don't have to prepare as much.
It's so true. It's so true. But it's scary. It's really scary in that, because it's this conundrum that keeps going round and round, in that I'm like, I know I'm at my best when I just show up and just share.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, but when you've got all your notes and everything laid back, you can't go too wrong, but that's obviously very much from your head. So it's this, and each time I do it, I get more and more comfortable with it. But it's there. I think for me, there is a happy medium in that I have my prompts, but they're nothing more than prompts, so that if I do get stuck, I've got something to prompt me to take me to the next place. But everything comes from my heart. And Yeah, you're totally right though, and it's kind of one of those funny things, isn't it? That you know, the better you are, the less you prepare, because we're taught in society, or the less you prepare, the better you are, I should say. You know, we're taught in society. You know, our ego wants everything to be so controlled and make sure you've got everything sorted, tick every know-how, practice it, rehearse it, do everything. That's actually one of the things that I always think about TED Talks, you know, and that I think I've told on TED Talks you have to have rehearsed your whole speech, you know, word by word, and you have to show them you've memorized it. And I'm not sure it's always the case, but generally. And, you know, that's almost the opposite of what I want to show out of my heart. And when I've got words that I know I need to deliver, I go into my head. It's why I don't like sort of presenting as much or hosting something, because you've got a script. Whereas when you're just answering, you're just flowing.
Yeah, I've got a situation coming up where I'm presenting in a week or so to a big group of senior execs, and it's a ticketed online event, and they're actually going to I've got to pre-record my entire 1 hour presentation just in case there's a technology hitch on the day. And I was going for a walk today thinking about what I was going to say and feeling exactly into this conversation, but within me about how much I needed to prepare. But the one thing I said to the AV guys today, I was like, you do realize that what you record the week before is going to be nothing like what actually happens on the day, because I'll be feeling differently. It's a different day and it's going to come out completely differently. So
does that scare them?
No, but it was just interesting because I had to go through the process of what we're talking about within myself and realizing that I can't make it the same, because then it won't be authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they want you at your best, they've got to let you just show up and show them that space.
Yeah. But what I am finding, and I don't know whether you're doing a lot of this at the moment, but presenting via online technologies when you're sitting at home, it's so hard because you can't read the audience and you don't know what's landing. And I'm really good at sort of pivoting when I need to. And like, I'll change 180 degrees if I feel what I'm saying is not landing. But when there's no feedback, you know, and it's when, you know, the mind is definitely negatively biased, because I'll come off some of these conversations and I'll be like, oh man, I'm not sure that worked. And then the person will ring me up, oh, that was great and everyone loved it. And I'll be like, really? I wasn't getting that.
I feel exactly the same. Absolutely the same. There's no rapport. You're just hitting an empty space. You're getting nothing. You're just talking to the screen, and you have no idea how it's landing. And I find it very challenging, if I'm honest. And I'm not really putting my name in the hat to do too much of it. As a result, I feel that the time is better served for me right now in trying to push on with writing a book, because that is perfectly suited for right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. But on the flip side, I'm also feeling like if I can become comfortable with that, and if I can actually navigate my way through that, it's going to improve me dramatically. So
very true.
In a way, kind of stepping into that discomfort is only going to be beneficial in the long run.
Totally. If you can do it without feedback, then how good would you be when you're actually standing there and you can bounce off everyone even more? It gives you another thing to play with, and you're already great at it.
Yeah. Totally. And also this idea of like learning to trust myself. That even if I can't feel that feedback, like knowing within myself that if that truth is coming out of my heart, it's going to resonate. And I don't actually, whilst it's better to have that feedback, even if I don't for some reason, trusting in yourself that you're still able to connect with people.
Totally. Yeah, you can. Yeah, but it's not easy. It's not easy. I feel the same even when I do an Instagram live. You're talking to a screen. Who am I talking to? I don't know. But at least you can get comments and stuff on there. But I totally hear you, and I thrive off that. I actually try and, when I'm in front of an audience, I really try and stand there and be very present to the whole room and really take it in and feel the whole thing. So there's a real big pause at the beginning to take everything in and feel that energy and feel the eyeballs and feel alive off that space. Sitting in front of a screen, I mean, obviously this works great and I can see you and I can feel that. But when you've got 50 people hidden in the Zoom catalog that you can't, and you delivering this, and it's hard. It's very hard. And I think the importance of this is, we're talking about human connection here, and there are many facets to it, but being able to feel someone, to feel their energy, feel their presence, feel how they're delivering something in person is a very important and powerful thing. And I know that in this country, certainly, and I'm sure it's probably the same in Australia, but loneliness was a big mental health problem before this arrived. So like you're saying, I don't know how it's going to feel, because I know FaceTime and everything is great, and we can do all that stuff. We can connect over Zoom and stuff, but if people were lonely before, I'm worried about what comes out of all this at the end. You know, how are people feeling after that? I don't know, but yeah, there's nothing like human connection in person, that's for sure.
Well, you know, obviously there's the element of touch as well, which is huge. But it's interesting, like one-to-one right now, speaking to you over Zoom, I can feel an energetic connection. It's very clear, but when it scales up, it's harder to feel.
Absolutely, exactly. Sure. Yeah. I'm the same. Yeah.
So, man, I wanted to ask you about your, I guess, the physical nature of your work too. I mean, obviously, you you clearly look after yourself physically. There's no doubt about that. Is that, are you like a personal trainer as well? Is that part of the deal for you? You see that as all integrated?
I am a personal. I did qualify as a personal trainer. I don't practice it, but I guess it was a big part of my journey. But interestingly, you know, my sort of self-development physically, if you like, began at 18, but it all came from seeking validation. Yeah. You know, I thought as a man, I'd be much better off if I was kind of represented a strong, muscular, and I thought that would get me respect, and I'd, you know, feel more validated. When I walked into a room, people would look and go, "God, who's that guy?" That's what I was seeking deep down, which isn't healthy at all. But it's come now to the point where, you know, I've learned that I feel most proud of myself when I look after myself and I treat my body with respect and kindness. And for me, that is exercising. You know, it doesn't have to be every day, but if I can, I try and exercise every day, and I try and put healthy foods inside of me. When I don't do that, I just don't feel as proud of myself. I don't feel like I'm showing up. I believe that, you know, heart, soul, it craves that we try and live to our full potential, and when I'm not showing up for myself in that area, if I'm eating bad foods too much, you know, there's nothing wrong with me. Sometimes I have bad foods, but there's a balance for me. If I'm doing it too much, then I start to just feel kind of just a lack of alignment. I don't feel like I'm being true, and I'm not treating myself with kindness. This for me is self-care. This is where self-care comes from. So it's just a healthy habit really for me now, to look after myself and try and treat myself with love. It's different for everyone, you know. For me, that's a deep value, but I'm not saying that it has to be that way for everybody. But it's about being true and honest with yourself and trying to align yourself.
Yeah, I think, you know, if I'm honest with myself, that's probably an area that I've fallen down on at times over the years, like treating my body well, and I think as part of you know, the warrior within this movement that we're trying to create, certainly there's definitely a physical aspect to it. If we're trying to create that sort of, you know, inner warrior, I think we kind of look at it through probably four aspects, and the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, however you want to call that, just a connection to something bigger than you, source. And so, you know, for me, I guess that's where the question sprung from, around, because that physical side of the warrior is super important. We offer the guys, you know, movement physical classes as part of what we do.
Nice, yeah. And I think you know, there's no doubt there's a huge amount of benefit to exercise in many different areas, you know, mentally and physically. When you exercise, it can really give you a lot of boost, you know, better for your sleep. There's so many different things. And I find when I exercise, I do tend to eat better as well, because I kind of feel like I don't want to waste the work I've just put in by, you know, just having a quick, cheap thrill with some tasty but ultimately unhealthy food. I want to serve myself. So there are so many. For me, it's a lot of life is about momentum and creating positive cycles. And I spoke about it recently, that on the contrary, it's very easy to have a negative cycle. You know, for me, when I stop exercising, or in this time at the moment with hay fever, I haven't been going outside. I've had no fresh air. I haven't slept as well. When I haven't slept as well, I haven't feel like I'm exercising at all at times. And then I feel lethargic and tired. I'm not getting that spring in my step. And with that, I'm going to bed, but I'm not exhausted, tired. I'm just sort of lethargic and not sleeping so well again, and just knock-on effect. And then, repeat. Whereas trying to just keep a positive momentum in your life, exercise can really help you serve that. You do that, you feel good about yourself, you feel proud, you put healthy food in you, you sleep better that night, you wake up with a spring in your step, you look in your mirror and you feel like, I'm serving myself well and I'm on a positive track, and then you feel more productive as you take it to your work. And there's a lot of cycles that can happen within your life either way. And the exercise is a great momentum builder for me. It just helps me tread forward.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. But I was interested in what you were saying before around using it as a negative, I guess. And to me, it all comes down to intention, doesn't it? And I think any of those four aspects that I just mentioned can be used in a negative way. I mean, I'm a meditation teacher, and you can absolutely use meditation as a way of bypassing. It's like, I often say to people, like, when you're driving to that meditation class or whatever you're doing, like, I ask, what are the thoughts that are going through your head? It's like, oh, now I can spend an hour actually floating above my problems. You know what I mean? And it's in a bypassing kind of way. And I'm like, well, if that's what you're doing with your meditation practice, then honestly, you may as well go down the pub. Like, you need to be. Meditation is about just being okay with whatever comes up, not deliberately using it as a way to create separation between you and the things that you don't want to feel. So in a similar way, you could look at all those aspects, and it all comes down to intention, doesn't it?
It does, and now we're getting into complicated areas, because there are a lot of grey areas, because you've got to observe. You want to observe your emotions and you want to feel them. But so someone could easily say, well, how's that different from? I know I'm angry, but whatever. I'm going to the pub and I'm just going to drown myself out, so I'll just observe them. And whatever. Do you know what I mean? They're very fine, and I get with people, it's very difficult when we're talking about this stuff that if you're new to this, there are very small grey areas in some spaces, and I think it's partly why this journey never ends. We can easily sort of start to tread. You might think, I've just meditated, that's great, but the reality is you just run away from your problems instead. And we're always learning, and none of us are ever getting this right perfectly all the time. But if we can just, the way I see it is, life is a game, and the more we can arm ourselves with the rules and understand them fully and how it all works, the better opportunity we've got of doing it right. And
I agree.
It's complicated.
It is complicated. To me, it just comes down to paying attention, just paying close attention, just really, really observing, rather than just, going through the motions. Like, it's like, just taking a step back, almost like being that bigger eye, and just paying attention to what's going on all the time.
Absolutely. Not drowning ourselves in it.
Yeah, little adjustments here and there. And I think you're right. It's just, it's never ending.
It's never ending, but I do see it as a game. It's a game to be played, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, and I don't mean it in terms of trying to trick people, in playing that, but it's learning what works for you, learning how you really operate, learning what really serves you at a deep level, not what serves you through instant gratification. It just is a quick win. Learning about yourself, what really matters to you, and are you behaving in a way that will actually get you to that place, or helping you get to that place, or are you just doing things and covering up your deeper emotions through, the things that look pretty and make you look good. It's all a game for me.
Well, no, and I like the way you say that, because at the end of the day, that's that playful nature is really what separates us from other species, and I like the way you use the word play there. It's not play as in like playing someone or being deceitful or whatever. It's play in the sense that Albert Einstein said play is the highest form of research.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. It's something, to be honest, it's a big area I'm still working on, play.
Yeah, right.
There's still gaps for me, for sure. I want to play more. I want to be silly more.
Yeah.
But there's a danger that this stuff can become very serious. Very easily, and very deep and very heavy. And play is just as important as the heavy, deep stuff. Laughing, smiling, but not disrespectfully, but being able to, at the end of the day, enjoy this whole thing, not get bogged down in the seriousness of needing to be better.
Yeah, well, I like to say play is serious business.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, totally. I hear you. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you. Absolutely. Yeah. It's how do you play?
You know, man, I've got a 5-year-old son. So
Perfect.
yeah, I just kind of, you get down on the floor and you go down to his level and you let him lead.
Yeah,
And you find yourself in very creative, imaginative, playful scenarios that, as a 51-year-old man, I couldn't even begin to dream up. So I just let him lead the play.
totally. That's amazing. What a beautiful way to be able to be led.
Yeah.
Because they do show us the way, right? Especially at that age 5, it's they're old enough to kind of to be exploratory and curious, but
Oh yeah.
still totally
Yeah.
playful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, man. I like to say my 5-year-old and my ex-wife are my two biggest gurus for different
Yes.
reasons.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, I love that. Yeah, great. It's a great way to play.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we should probably leave it there before we could talk all night. But just where do people find you if people want to kind of get involved in what you're up to? What's the best way to connect with you?
Generally, it's all through Instagram for me. I haven't yet mastered the play. That's a good example. Actually, play on TikTok.
Mm.
I'm not there yet, but so everything goes through Instagram. It's the Naked Professor on Instagram.
Yep.
But yeah, everything pretty much goes through there.
And so you like your latest blogs and stuff, even if they're following you on Instagram, we'll find out about that stuff.
Generally, yeah. I mean, for a while I was doing longer ones on my website, but I've got
Right.
to say I try and do as much as I can just through the one channel because
Yep.
there's too much right now.
Yeah, yeah, understand. Well, listen, man, it's been
Yeah.
an absolute pleasure, and I hope our paths continue to cross.